The title of my sermon today is actually called Nineveh. A lot of times we look at the story of Jonah. It is a very cute story, a story that we tell our children, and we know it back and forth. Everybody knows the story of Jonah. But actually, have you read it? When's the last time we actually took a look at it to see what was the messages that God actually had intended for us? Or do we go around saying the nursery rhyme version of Jonah? Today, the story actually isn't about Jonah. It's about Nineveh and what Nineveh can actually teach us. If you can turn in your Bibles to Jonah 1:1. Jonah chapter 1, verse 1. It says, that's a different version. Okay, I'm going to read it from where I got it. I don't know which version I have here, but that's okay. This is the King James Version. Now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it, for the wickedness is come up before me. And Jonah rose up to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. I'm going to stop right there. Jonah is a prophet. This is not his first assignment. Jonah has been preaching for years. Jonah has a reputation. So now that God actually asked him, go up to Nineveh and preach. You don't see that he argues with God. You don't see that he tries to understand why God is asking him this. What does Jonah do? He gets up and he goes in the opposite direction. Have you ever wondered why Jonah went in the opposite direction? Because it's important. One, I want to say that what we see as people is not actually the way that God sees us. We don't see like God sees. So in Jonah's eyes, this was going through his head. Just a little history leading up to this. The children of Israel had once again returned to idolatry. And as a result of them turning from God into these pagan worships and statues and idols, God punished them. He allowed the Assyrian people to come and overthrow the Israelites and take them captive. But when the Assyrians, which are the Ninevites, they came and made them, they enslaved them, they actually were cruel. They tortured them. They shed their blood. They raped them. They treated them any way that they want. And this was fresh in Jonah's mind. The way that the Assyrians and the Ninevites had treated his people. So it was no way am I going up into that place to preach to them. It is equivalent to a Jew going to Nazi Germany and actually preaching to them to save their lives after everything they've been through in the Holocaust. It's not happening. Jonah was actually filled with anger and hatred and bias and prejudice. So there is no way I'm going to that city. It's amazing. The people that we actually have problems with, those are the people that God actually sends us to help. It could be your family members that you haven't talked to in so many years. I can remember when I started my doctorate program. It was my first year. We had this class that was an amazing class on cultural diversity. One of the things that they actually required us to do was to challenge ourselves to face our prejudices. But I don't have any. So that was going to be hard. We all have prejudices. So I had to actually do some soul searching to think, what is my prejudice? The reason why we had to do this, because we will encounter, I study psychology, so I do psychology. So we will encounter every kind of people. So you need to know what your prejudices are, because you have to face that before you can actually help someone else. So, with this assignment, there were some people that had some racial issues. There were some of my colleagues that they went to the black church because they wanted to experience the worship and being around the people, because they've never experienced that before. That was great. There were some people that went to the seniors because they had issues with the older people, because they thought about death and things like that. But what was my issue? My issue was I was raised in the church, and I was raised to dislike a certain people because they were abomination. I had to challenge myself. I actually went to the gay community I don't know what the word that I'm looking for, but to embrace, to encounter this experience, to get past my prejudices. Let me tell you, I was terrified. I asked everybody that I know to go with me, and I had not one single friend to say yes. But I knew that this was something that I actually had to deal with. So I actually went to my assignment. And I was there, and I was afraid. I was afraid that if someone actually saw me, that they may think that I'm in this lifestyle. I started thinking that what if someone actually approached me or something, they do something to me? I had all these fears just rush through my head. And I was afraid, and I was looking around, and I was out of place. But in my assignment, I had to embrace it. So what I actually learned from this experience was they were people. They were people no different than me. They laughed, they struggled, they hurt, they had problems. I had to get past my own biases and actually able to see the people. The reason I bring this up is because this is what happened and took place with Jonah. Jonah versus God. The way Jonah saw the people of Nineveh, they're heathens, they're pagans, they're sorcerers, they deal with pagan gods. They hurt our people. I hate them. But what God saw, he saw my children struggling. He saw his children, his creation, his people in need of help. What God saw, God was actually angry because of all of the idol worship. All of the pagan worship, all of the witchcraft and sorcery that they were practicing, these things went against God's word. So he was more concerned about them. He said, go and tell them that I will destroy them. But Jonah had to first get past his own bias. I need you to turn in Exodus chapter 20. We're going to start at verse 1. I need you to understand what God sees, what God expects, and what God wants from us. Can we put Exodus 21? And God spoke all these words. I'm going to read it from this translation. You can also follow up there. It said, and God spake unto Moses, saying, oh, that's the wrong one, sorry. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which has brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. God is saying here, Look, let's get this straight. I am the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of bondage. When you were in those chains, were you calling out to Muhammad? When you were making those bricks, did Buddha come down and help you? Did Hare Krishna lift you up when you were in chains and going through all these problems? He said, no, it was I. So let it be clear that I am the Lord your God who had brought you out. Verse 3. Then he said, you shall have no other God before me. You shall have no other God before me. A lot of times when we look at this, we actually think what God is actually saying is that there's some type of hierarchy, that there's all these different gods, and God needs to be number one. But that's not what he's saying here. What God is actually saying is, you will not have any other gods in my presence. You will not have any gods before me. Michael Jordan wrote a book called Driven Within. And at one chapter in the book, he actually starts talking about, he went over to a friend's house, and they were actually going out for dinner. And he said it was getting cold, and he asked his friend Fred Whitfield, can I borrow a jacket from you? And he said, yeah, go in the closet and get whatever you want. So Michael Jordan went into his bedroom and went into the closet. And Mr. Whitfield went about his way, was pouring some drinks. And he noticed that Mike was taking a long time. You know, he wasn't really worried, but it's like, it's taking a long time. And then suddenly Mike appears, and he has a pile of clothes in his hand. And he drops it right there on the ground, and he goes back in the man's room. And Fred is looking and is like, what's going on? And he's looking down at the pile of clothes, and he notices something. Every single piece of clothing that was there on the floor had Puma on it. Mike came back with another pile of clothes, dropped it right there on the floor. He didn't say a word. He went into the kitchen and he grabbed a knife. He came back out and started stabbing the clothes and ripping them and shredding them to pieces. And then he picked it up, he took it outside and put it in the dumpster. Fred is like, okay, but when the man had a knife. So when Mike comes back, Mike says, hey, in the morning I want you to call my rep and he'll replace all of those things. And he said, listen, as long as we're together, you can't be on the fence. You have to make up your mind where you stand. All those other clothes came from another professional who had gave it to him. You know, but Mike is like, no, if we're friends, that represents him. It seems a little strange. But what I want you to actually see, it's the level of commitment that God is looking from us. That God doesn't want space in your closet. He wants the whole closet. He doesn't want space in your life. He wants the whole thing. That is the level of commitment that God is looking for us. So when God actually sees us with all these other gods that we have created, it offends him. Can you go to verse 4? You shall not make for yourself any idols in the form of anything in heaven above or in the earth below or on the earth beneath or the waters below. There is nothing that you can make that can replace me. When I looked up the names of gods. And it was interesting because it had a list of 1,000 gods. There was God Anet, who is the god of war. It is the god Asherah, who was the walker of the sea. It's Mot, the god of death. Hamosa, the god of sexual desire. It is Mammoth, the god of money and wealth. It is Kathros, the god of strength and power. And Chilo, do you know who is the god of sport? Oh, we do, or we all do. It is Nike. For real. Literally, look it up. It is Nike. So when you see the wings on the side of the emblem of Nike, that is the God. We have created many gods. But what if I tell you that the gods of here and now and the gods of today, what if they weren't those little images that you see in the Catholic Church, the saints? What if it's not the little Buddha image that you see when you go into the Chinese restaurant sitting there with money on its hands? What if it's not the god of Janessa, who is the Hindu god, the elephant figure with all the different hands? What if the statues and the images of God that God is talking about, the idols, are not those carvings? What if they're the makings of our own hands? What if it's the house that we're living in? What if it's the career that we built? What if it's the job that you created? What if it's your children or your spouse? Even when I was preparing this sermon, I came to realize, thank you, that there's another God. And he's gone. It's your cell phone. Can't live without it. Since the elections, I have been reading Facebook and posting and protesting and all kinds of things. And it's like, and I'm craving it. I need to know what else Donald did. Oh my goodness. We have created these things that have taken the place of God in our life. If I was to ask a real question, how much time do you really spend with God on a day-to-day basis? What would be your answer? Reality? I know what sounds good and what we might actually say. I studied my Sabbath school lesson or whatever, but in reality, for some of us, it is the time that we spent while we were saying grace over our food. And we said it quickly because I wanted to eat. For some of us, it is the time that we spend right here, right now, in church. But we don't have time. We're busy. I got to work, and after work, I got to come home. I got to clean. I got to feed the kids. I got to run to this. I got to pay this. I got to do this. We got so many things that we're legitimately busy. But have these things become gods in our life? I would like to ask you some questions. To ask yourself to reveal who these gods are in your life. I have to admit that when I ask myself, there was much more than I would care to even acknowledge. So ask yourself this question. What is in your heart that causes you to worry? What's in your heart that causes you to be disappointed? When we feel overwhelmed by disappointment, it is a good sign that something has become more important to us than it should have been. We have placed intense hope and longing in something other than God. Your job, we can't live without it. Your marriage, these things aren't necessarily bad. But it's when these things have consumed our thoughts and it is, we cannot exist without them. So then ask yourself this question. What do you complain about? If you don't know, just look next to you and ask them, what do I complain about? I'm sure they would tell you. Do you know that, well, let's see. A lot of times, are we complaining about our finances, not having enough? Or what the next thing, the next big ideal that we're going to do? Are we complaining about he ain't no good? Are we complaining about our children? Are we not happy? There's a difference between the two questions that I just asked. The first question was, what are we worried about? That's internal. That's inside of us. That's what we worry about. That's what we're constantly thinking of. But what do you complain about is normally our external world, what's outside of us, what's affecting us. The Bible said, be careful or be anxious about nothing, for he will supply our every need. So if there's something that continues to bother us, then it has taken a greater place in our lives than it should have. The next question. Where do you make your financial sacrifices? Where does your money go? Is it, am I pouring my money into church? Let's go plan B. Is it, look at your credit card statements. Am I spending it on clothes and things and toys? Is it the car that I wash every week? Sometimes twice if it gets a little dirt on it. Is it gambling? We need more. Where do you sacrifice your money? Because I guarantee that is also where your God lies. He said, store up your treasures in heaven. But we are constantly trying to build up our treasures right here. What worries you? It could be the thoughts that keep you up at night. Are you worried about being ridiculed? What other people think about you? Are you worried about being alone? Are you worried that you don't measure up? What are you worried about? Where is your sanctuary? When you are hurt, when things are bothering you, when things are going wrong, where do you turn? Is it the refrigerator? My feelings are hurt, so I go and open the refrigerator and I make me something? Do I go to the internet and search and spend time? And what would it reveal if God actually took your internet searches to Judgment Day? Is it inside of a bottle? Or some type of other escape? Is it our pain medications and that we overuse? Where is our sanctuary when we are hurt, when we are lonely, when we are bored? Where do we turn to? Because this is where the idols are placed. They're not the statues engraved in wood and rock and marble. They're the things that are so ordinary that we created with our own hands or we purchased with our money. It has become gods in our lives. And God is saying no more. I'm fed up. He sent Jonah to Nineveh because of all the idol worship. And Jonah's, okay, first let's go through the children's story. So Jonah, we know that he got up and he went the opposite way of God. Went to Joppa, got on a boat to go to Tarsus, and while they were on the sea, the storm came and rose. The boat's being tossed side to side. I got a picture of it. Jeff, can you help me out? Jonah on the boat.
Started getting rough, the tiny ship was tossed. If not for the courage of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. The minnow
it's okay.
Would be lost.
Thank you. We got the idea. Thank you, Jeff. So he gets on the boat, and the storm comes, and everyone is worried. These are Marines. These are professional sailors that know what to do in the case of a storm. But this thing was so bad that they were all praying to their gods. So then they get up and they're trying to look for everything to throw overboard to make the boat lighter. And they go downstairs, and what do they see? Jonah is lying there asleep. How can you sleep through all of this movement and weather and tossing and turning? Get up and pray to your God so that we may be saved. They're doing everything that they can, and the storm is still going on. So then they said, who has angered their God to bring this upon us? So then they draw straws to see who it was. It turned out to be Jonah. When doing my research, I found out that the same story is in the Quran, and it said that they did it 3 times, and every single time Jonah came up as the person. So then they looked at Jonah and they said, man, who do you serve? And what have you done? And he says, I'm a Hebrew who serves the God of heaven and earth that created the sea and all that is. And they were fearful. And they said, so what should we do that he doesn't destroy us? And Jonah said, if you throw me overboard, he'll save your life. He is so lucky that Brother Cephas wasn't on there because he got to go. But no, if you read the story, they didn't do that. They kept trying to save the boat. But when it became so much that it started to overtake them, they said, Jonah, you gotta go. They said, pray to your God that he won't have your blood on our heads. But you got to go, Jonah. So they threw Jonah overboard. And it said a great fish came and swallowed him up. A lot of times we like to think that it was a whale, but it was not a whale. It just says a big fish. But if you read in the story of Jonah, you will see the conditions in which he was in. It said seaweed was around his head and the surroundings were closing in. He was not comfortable. It was not Pinocchio and Gelato sitting on a boat inside of, what was the Moby, the big whale? Who? Pinocchio, what was the whale's name? Monster. So it wasn't like there was a lot of room. It was a tight fit. It was nasty. It was disgusting. And I'm not sure about this, but I'm going to say it the way that it's written in the Bible. It said for 3 days, Jonah was in the whale. And then it said, then he repented and prayed and called God. I don't know if he was stubborn enough to wait 3 days or if he started right away, but it looks like he waited before he came to his senses. So anyway, so after the 3 days, Jonah repented and asked for God's forgiveness and praised God, and the fish vomited him up onto dry land. He didn't even take him to Nineveh. He had to walk a day's journey in order to get there. Let's think about this. He's just been in a large fish for 3 days, seaweed wrapped around his head, and all the guts and the acids and everything is all in his clothing and everything, and he's walking for a day's journey, which the sun is coming down and ripening real nice, to get to the city to start preaching. It said that Jonah started preaching. He started telling the people for 40 days, Nineveh will be overthrown. God is not pleased with you. And one of the most important things that takes place in this chapter happens in Jonah chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. It said, and Jonah began to enter into the city a day's journey, and he cried and said, yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Now, I don't know about you, but just for a second, I'm just using my imagination. There are places in LA that you can't go and say in 4 days the Raiders are going to be overthrown without getting your head bashed in. You know, it's like he's going to this city who is known for torturing and terrorizing people, telling them that they're going to be overthrown. But once he actually tells them in verse 5, it says, so the people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed and fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest of them even unto the least of them. It goes on to say that the king was converted and he proclaimed the name of God, and he took off his robe and he put on sackcloth, and he required the whole country to fast and to pray Not only will they fast and pray, he said your animals will fast. Put on sackcloth on your animals, and they shall not eat nor drink, just in hopes that God might find it in his heart to forgive them. I come to you today and I say, Nineveh, El Centro, you will be overthrown by the things of this world. You will get consumed by the things that this world appears to offer you. It will take you away from God's grace. It will destroy you. Hear ye the word of the Lord. He said, I am a jealous God. I am a jealous God. Women, how many have a good man that they would not just let some other person just come up in their house and take their husband? You know, I actually love the Obamas. I love the Obamas. I don't care what political party you may believe in. You have to respect the relationship and the love that they actually have for each other. But I saw something, and I hope that you can see this real clear because it's very interesting. A picture can tell 1,000 words. Do me a favor. Can someone hit those lights right there? Because I want you to see this. All right. That's good. Thank you. Now, this is the president at some type of convention or something's going on. You know, President Obama is talking to this woman who's sitting next to his wife, Michelle. Next slide. They're taking selfies. They're having a good time. Next picture. Now, President Obama is facing a lady and talking with her. But can you see Michelle's face? I don't think so. Next slide. Ma'am, please. I ain't trying to hear it. He's like, oh, Michelle. He's trying to make things better. Next slide. Oh, baby, I'm sorry. Now, I want you to see this next slide. Next slide, please. Do you see this? President Obama is on the other side of his wife. That's called jealousy, and that ain't going to happen. Not here, not today, not ever. So they may be in love, but there's a reason. She is not going to let her man go or let anyone come between them. Now imagine if we as people feel that way about our spouse or the person we're in a relationship with, how much more will God have towards his children that he created? If anything comes between you and God, he is a jealous God. He doesn't like it. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm telling you, search your heart, because we didn't intentionally place these idols there. They somehow emerged and appeared. And the last story that I'm going to tell you, you can take that off. There was this man that, this evangelist that actually went to India. And while he was in India, he went to this home. He was invited over. He came in, he was invited in, and they all sat down in the living room. And inside the living room, he noticed right there in the center was this idol. And all of the chairs were arranged to face this idol. And it made him feel uncomfortable. It made him feel uneasy. He's like, wow, the idolatry. It's crazy. So then he left and he went home, and he was exhausted from the trip and the flight. And he went home and he went into his living room and he sat down in his chair to watch TV. TV has become one of the number one idols. All of our furniture is arranged to face the TV. It's where we go when we had a long day and we're tired. We sit down and watch TV. When we're bored, when we're lonely, when we need to watch the sports, when we need to know the news to find out what's going on, we turn to the TV. We have set that thing up as an idol in our own home. We spend most of our time watching TV and movies. We are offended to go into someone's home and see an idol of a Buddha or something sitting there. But we come home to our handmade gods that we cannot live without. We need to clean house. We need to check ourselves, clean our souls, and get rid of these things that have taken up space and place in our hearts that we don't have time, we don't have room for God, because He's not going to have it. We wonder why our prayers are weak. We wonder why we're not strong and that we're not able to do things in Jesus' name. It's because there's too much space being taken up by other things that must go. They have to go. God will tolerate it no longer. You shall have no other gods before me in my presence. If you are mine and you're called by my name, I am first. I am not interested in any open relationships.